Welcome to part one of building a 2D farming game from zero. We're going to create a new project. I'm going to call this Farm World. Select mobile because we do not need 3D. For our sprites, we are using the free Sproutlands asset pack by Cup Nooble. You can find the link in the description. If you purchase the asset pack, you'll get access to some additional sprites. Before we start adding anything to our scene, let's go ahead and create a new folder called Assets. And let's import our Sproutlands asset pack. And to make our game 2D, we will need to start with the 2D scene root node. And with our assets imported and our scene instantiated, we can move on and create our player node. We'll start by adding a sprite 2D node. And we're going to drag this sprite sheet over to our empty texture. By default, it is going to display the image as if it were a single sprite, but by adjusting the number of horizontal and vertical columns under animation, we can effectively trim the sprite into displaying only a single tile. So we have 4 horizontal frames and 4 vertical frames. But why is the sprite so blurry? If we go under texture over here, we can see we have a filter property. We need to set that to nearest. Now, instead of doing this for every single image and sprite we import, we can actually define this at the project settings level. If you go under rendering and textures, we can set our default texture filter to nearest. And now we won't have to make that adjustment. And you can see if I step through the frames, it changes the visible sprite from that sheet. So now that we have our sprite rendering in our game, let's add the ability to move. Instead of handling movement in a script on the sprite node, we're going to leverage the character body 2D node that Godot provides. So we're going to right click our sprite 2D and we're going to click reparent to new node. And then we are going to find our character body 2D. And we should see that our sprite is now the child of our character body 2D node. Let's go ahead and rename the character body 2D node to player. And if we look at our warning here, character body 2D needs a collision shape. And while we're not exactly ready for this yet, we'll go ahead and add it. So if we right click our player, add child node, and we look for a collision shape, there we go. We just want collision shape. Perfect. But we got another warning. What is this one saying? A shape must be provided. So if we look over at the top of our inspector, we can see that our collision shape has a shape property that is empty. For now, we'll go ahead and just add a simple capsule, resize it to our character or about, and we'll revisit this later. And now we are ready to create our script. So if we click onto our player node, we can come down to attach script, and we're going to create a new script. We're going to call this player controller. And then hit create. And you can see that this script automatically extends the node from which we made it. So we are extending our character body 2D here. And there's one more step before we get into the actual implementation, and that is setting up input maps. So this will enable us to easily control device support from our project setting. And what it does is it maps raw inputs to actions. So we can have one or more inputs and or devices to a single action. So for our actions, we're going to create a move left, right, up, and down action. Now that our movement actions are defined, we click on the plus icon next to the actions themselves. We can define the input that is mapped to the action. So for move up, we'll just hit W. It is listening to your keys as you open it. Down, right, left. Great. We've got basic WASD movement defined in our action maps. Let's get started. So now that we have our input maps defined, let's implement our actual movement. In order to update our movement every frame, we're going to be using the process function. By using the built-in input get vector function, we can plug in the names of our input actions. So -x is going to be move left, And then we've got move rights for positive. Negative Y is actually move up and then move down. So this function gets the vector, but we need to multiply that times some speed. And let's go ahead and define a variable for speed. Perfect. And since we're extending character body 2D, all we need to do is update our velocity and then make a call to move and slide. And if we hit play, we are prompted to save our scene. We'll just call this main. Save that. And then, oh, our character is way up in the left-hand corner, but our movement is working. So what's going on with the viewport? Let's fix that. To fix our viewport, we'll need to add our camera as a child of our player, which will lock the position to our player's position. And then we're going to come over and we're going to zoom in a little bit. Okay. If we play this again, hey, that's better. And there we go. Our camera's position is fixed. The zoom is appropriate. And our move works, but we have nothing to move around. So it looks like we're static. Let's add some tile maps. So if we switch back to our scene view, minimize our player for now. And we're going to add a child node to the root. And we're going to add a tile map layer. Now be careful, do not add tile map. This is deprecated. Tile map layer is what we're after. And you can see we have a new editor window that has appeared with tile maps. And the text in the middle of this editor window suggests that we have no tile set resource. And if we look in our inspector, that is correct. We have no tile set resource for this map layer. So let's go ahead and create a new tile set. And we'll go ahead and save this. And we'll just call this terrain. Let's create a new folder for resources. And we'll save that in there. So we have our tile set. And it's subtle, but if you look at the bottom here, we have a tile map and a tile set tab. Now, in order to populate the tile set, we're going to click over to our tile set tab, come back to our resources, open our tile sets, and for now, let's just drag over our grass. And it's asking if you'd like to automatically create tiles, select yes. And look at that. Our tile set, at the very basics, is set up. Well, that's great, but how do we use this? So tile sets, this is all an editing tab. If we click over to tile maps, we can see our grass and we are able to select and paint with our new tile map. But where did our character go? Why do we just paint over our character? Well, because our tile map and our player have the same Z index and the same parent, their sorting is then based off of the hierarchy. So if we just move our tile map layer above our player node, we can see that that is resolved. Now, there are other tools that can help us paint our tile maps. I would not recommend this process. Let's go ahead and check out the auto tiling in Godot. So back in our tile sets, if we click our select option, we can choose different tiles and you can see the base tile updating each time I select these. So they've got bunch of different properties, animation, rendering, terrains, miscellaneous. We're going to be focused on terrains. So you can apply a tile to a terrain set and to a specific terrain within that set. At the moment, we do not have any terrain sets defined, so let's go ahead and do that. If we click onto our tile map layer and we open up our tile set, we see we've got options for physics layers, terrain sets, navigation layers, and custom data layers. Right now, we're just worried about terrain sets, so we'll go ahead and add a terrain set, and we want it to match on the corners and the sides. If we expand our terrains, we can see there's nothing there, so let's go ahead and create our first terrain. And we'll just call this grass, and we'll give it an appropriate grass color. We'll back into the terrain. We can see if we now bump this terrain set up to 0, 0, technically, that is a part of our grass terrain now. But how does that help with auto tiling? Well, if you look at the terrain peering bit, and the way this works is if it's -1, it's ignored. If it's a number, then it is the index of the terrain in the terrain set. Now we could go in here and adjust each one of these. And as you can see, each time we do, it updates with a little visual that represents our terrain. So color, grass, saying I need to match grass terrain in this direction. I need to match grass terrain in this direction, and whichever direction on whichever side it's on. And while you could do this manually for each tile, let me show you a better way. In order to easily apply terrain sets to all of them, what we want to do is hold Control, select everything, go ahead and set our terrain to 0 to our grass terrain, and then we can come over to Paint, and under Paint Properties, there's a terrain selection. We'll choose that, and then just simply choose your grass terrain. And I just clicked over all of those to enable them for this terrain. And then we can come in here and very easily just paint. Right click will remove it where we need our terrain peering bits. Conveniently, the Sproutlands asset pack comes with some references so you can apply the bit masks correctly. Now that our terrain is set up, we can leverage the tile map terrain. So we have a connect mode, which will try and connect everything on all sides, and then we have a path mode, which will try to connect with the previous painted tile. We're going to be using the connect mode. If we zoom out a little bit here, we're going to select the rectangle tool, and we're just going to draw a rectangle, and whoa, that looks much better. We've got our edges, we've got a bunch of various different tiles, but it's a little too noisy for me as far as what I assume are actually meant to be lily pads or something, and the grass. So if we hop back over to our tile set, we can actually paint the probability at which these tiles will occur. So we want our main probability of the inner to remain at 1, but let's drop the rest of them down to a 5% of probability. If we go back to our tile map, select the same area. There we go. It's much less dense, but still has some randomness to it and looks great. Well, let's see. Hey, there we go. Now it looks like we're moving again. Okay, awesome. Well, let's keep the ball rolling with tile maps. And let's go back and create a new terrain. And this terrain we'll call structures. Now that we have our new terrain set, let's add a new tile set. So let's go ahead and drag in our house, create our tiles, and then we're going to apply the same exact process that we did before. Go ahead and select everything. Give it the proper terrain set. And then if we go to our tile maps, we see I have a new terrain. But when we draw our house, it gets rid of the grass tiles underneath it. Now there is a way to change the Z index of individual tiles. However, that doesn't help us in this case because our grass tile is still being replaced. So what we need to do is create a new tile map layer. And we're going to put this on top of the other tile map layer, and we'll go ahead and rename these. We'll get this one as structures, and we'll call this one terrain. And if we click into our structures, again, we have no tile set, but we can reuse our terrain tile set. Now, if we go back to terrain, we'll go ahead and replace all this with grass again. And we click on our structures. Now, if we paint our house, there we go. So now we've got a house, we've got some grass, but I shouldn't be able to walk through the walls. So let's add some collision. So this is where our collider from earlier is going to come into play. Anything that hits the outer edges of this is going to prevent any further movement if we have it defined that way. So let's head back to our tile set, and surprise, surprise, we are still going to be using the paint tool, but this time, we're going to be painting a physics layer, and we don't have a physics layer yet. So we'll go ahead and open our terrain, and we'll add a simple physics layer. And for now, we won't worry about the collision layer and masks. We'll set that up in a second. We're just going to make sure that we've got our physics layer so we can apply our colliders. And you can see on the left, we have a rectangle with modifiable points. We'll go ahead and enable the half pixel snap. And if we click onto our tile, you can see our tile then becomes visible, which helps align it a little bit easier. And then you can just apply that anywhere that has the same shape. And there we go. We have our collider defined. Now, because everything is on the default layers, if we hit play, our collider should be working. And look at that. We've still got some work to do. As you can see, the whisker is kind of overlapping the side of the wall, and the top of our head stops at the base of the wall, but we'll get to that. We've successfully boxed ourselves into this house, so let's code our way out. Now, we could implement the door as a tile, but it's going to be easier to implement it as an actual node. So we'll find our doors in the tile sets, and we'll just add a new animated sprite 2D. If we look at our configuration warning, it is saying we do not have sprite frames. So we'll go ahead and create new sprite frames, and we will save this as door. By default, we have a default animation. We'll just go ahead and rename this to open close. And the reason we can get away with open and close is there's a handy play backwards function with the animation player. So what we're going to do is select a frame from our sprite sheet, choose our doors. So we go ahead and adjust this. We've only got the one horizontal frame. We can see that everything now aligns to the individual sprites. So we'll go ahead and select all of these and add all 4 frames. So let's reorder these. And we can see we have our door. Let's move that a little bit, and let's play this. And there we go. We can see we have our animating door. Awesome. Let's go ahead and position our door. Play that again. Animation looks good, but clearly we need to adjust our tile set. So we click back into structures, and we just click an individual tile. Looks like we were a little off on our adjustment, but you can see, there we go. So if we play, we can see we now have a little way out. In order to add a collider to our door object, we are going to need to create a static body 2D. So we're going to reparent the animated sprite under our static body 2D. And the warning, just like before, we need a collision shape. So we'll go ahead and add our collision shape. And for this shape, as you could tell with the walls, the collider being all the way around doesn't necessarily give the best experience. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a segment shape. And we're going to move the segment to be just in the middle. Now when we play, we'll be stopped. So we're trapped with a potential way out. Let's go ahead and add the functionality to get us out of the door. Go ahead and rename this static body 2D to door, and we will add a script. And door is good. First thing we'll need to do is define a variable that will track our open or closed state. Next, let's go ahead and define our open and close functions. So we'll just call this open. Very simple. Set is open to true. And our close function, which we'll set is open to false. Ooh. And we know on our open and close, we're going to have some animations that play. And for that, we're going to need a reference to our animated sprite 2D. So what we can do is define a variable with our onReady function, or decorator. And we're going to call this variable sprite. And we will set this equal to animated sprite 2D. And that's just going to grab the child animated sprite. And we can go ahead and call sprite play. And then when we close, we want sprite play backwards. Okay, so at the very least, we have our open and close function. But how do we trigger our open and close? Well, we're going to need some kind of an interaction hotkey. So we'll go ahead and add an interact action. And we'll go with the traditional E. Okay. So now we have an interact action set up to the hotkey of, and we'll just go with the most straightforward implementation for now, which is just going to be handling input events directly. So we could say if is action pressed, interact. If it is, then if we are open, close the door. Otherwise, open the door. All right, let's run this and see what happens. Hey, there we go. But it's just looping forever. So we'll need to fix that. Let's click back over to our animated sprite, and we'll just click off the animation looping there. Much better. So we've got a door that opens, but we can't get out of it. So let's go ahead and implement the collider code as well. So we'll define another onReady variable here. We'll just call it collider, collision shape 2D. So what we want to happen is that when our open is played, our collider effectively disappears. But if we were to disable the collider, we would never be able to close our door again. So what we will do is check to make sure that our collider shape is a segment. Oop, got to spell it right. And if it is, we know we have access to our collider shape A and B. And what we're going to do is just collapse our B point to our A point. So if we look at our collision shape and click on our segment, we can see that it extends from -6 to 6. So we're going to want our B point to be -6 if it's open. And then when we close it, we want to extend that back to the other side. We'll see if it works. Hey, perfect. Okay. Well, it's a good start. We have our terrain started. We have a house. We have some interaction. We have player movement. In the next part, we'll be looking more at tile maps and implementing a way to till our soil.